In the state of Minnesota, the second largest watershed is vast, beautiful, highly populated, and rich in agriculture. The lower Minnesota River watershed, a place of pride and progress, but its health is in peril. Elevated levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, and total suspended solids are making their way through the tributaries to the lower Minnesota River. Rivers and creeks throughout the watershed are filling up with sediment, like Rush River and High Island Creek north of Henderson. Farmers are losing valuable topsoil and nutrients. New practices to address this are being introduced.
There's your puppy. Oh.
Meet Shelby and Keith Hartman, a new family with an innovative way of planting cover crops on their farm in Gibbon, Minnesota. The cover crops reduce nitrogen from the waters and keep topsoil in place. Although water quality of the Rush River is not necessarily the first thing he thinks of when he gets up in the morning, Hartman's farm design helps improve it.
On my farm here, I've got a farrow finish 20 sow hog operation. That's sows are all on pasture. I farm 320 acres of corn, soybeans, field peas, barley, and alfalfa. And my corn and soybeans are conventional acres.
Keith Hartman grew up on an organic dairy farm, studied farm operations, agricultural business, and worked as an agronomist when his father rented 140 acres to him to help him get started. Already he's improving corn yields and saving time and money from tilling in the fall. How? Seeding cover crops while the corn is still growing.
My end goal with this was to find a way to reduce tillage by using the cover crop roots to do the tillage for me instead of doing fall tillage. We do fall tillage in this area because we have very heavy clay soils and it's hard for them to dry out in the spring. But with that, you do get some wind erosion if we have an open winter. And that's something that's always bothered me since I was a kid, so I wanted to try to find a way to reduce that. South central Minnesota, we don't have a lot of heat units to grow a cover crop after harvest like they do in other parts of the country.
His answer? Customizing a nitrogen applicator to additionally interseed a cover crop into the corn before harvest mid-June.
I figured at that stage we could get the cover crop established and growing, and then the corn would canopy, shade out the cover crop until September when the corn leaves start to dry and drop and let more sunlight through to get that cover crop taking off. When the corn gets to be about a foot tall, I'm coming in with my machine and I am putting an 8-inch strip of cover crop seed, this year annual ryegrass and radishes, down the center of my corn as it's growing. This new unit that I'm trying this year is the Yetter Magnum 10,000. And what I really like about this and why I'm running with it is I can citrus nitrogen and interseed cover crops at the same time. The coulter opens up the soil and puts the nitrogen 4 inches in the ground underneath the soil. And behind that is a shark tooth closing wheel to close the trench to seal the nitrogen in. And behind it is a firming wheel to pack that trench down so we don't lose any of the nitrogen to the volatilization in the air. So when I'm interseeding cover crops with this unit, I've got my shark tooth wheel to stir the soil and a firming wheel for good seed to soil contact. So I've added a seed tube tied to my Gandy air seeder that distributes the seed right behind the shark tooth wheel. So I'm getting that seed about 1/4 to 1/2 inch in the ground, or under the soil, and then firmed with the firming wheel. Since it was during side dress season, or split nitrogen application, I wanted to do it all at once to get a better return on our investment and make better use of our time. A lot of guys were flying it on with the airplanes in August, and they're using 25 to 30 pounds of seed, which is about a $50 seed cost per acre, with a 50-50 success rate. To me, that wasn't good enough. It does not cash flow. It would not be a sustainable practice. So I wanted to be able to get good seed to soil contact, and I wanted to be able to accompany it with applying nitrogen.
A farmer can use whatever equipment is available to create the seed bed and improve the seed to soil contact. This was simply how Keith chose to do it. And the results?
It was about 85% emergence that first year, which is excellent. Because we can handle a $15 per acre seed cost versus a $50, especially in these tight margins.
To help fund the equipment, the research, and the cover crops, several grants and local professionals helped him out. To pay for his equipment, he takes on side jobs for his neighbors, both interseeding and side dressing. He shares his experience with them, like when and what to spray before planting, and more. Questions come up in these conversations. Questions like, does the corn get enough nitrogen?
When that cover crop deteriorates in the spring, that'll release that nitrogen available for the following year. And I'm finding out the cover crop is not taking any nutrients away from that corn.
Are you getting better yields due to a healthier soil and crop diversity? Is it a sustainable practice?
I'm seeing an increase in corn yield the following year after the cover crop. The color is a very deep green color. So along with that, along with holding the nitrogen in the soil and changing the soils around with the cover crop, it's been a no-brainer for me. I'm going to continue to do it.
How is it water friendly?
I go out and I take soil nitrate tests to see how much soil nitrate that cover crop is holding, or that's less in the soil, that's immobile, that can go into our water. I'm holding about 15 pounds of nitrogen in that cover crop strip versus in the soil. So that's in plant form until next year. So that's nutrients that won't get into our water source. So that cover crop is going to be alive until the end of November. It takes almost a 26-degree temperature for 4 hours to kill this cover crop, and specifically the annual ryegrass. And that's got a very fibrous root system that's aggressively taking up nutrients in the fall when that starts to take off. So any nitrogen that's left in that soil is going to be taken in by that cover crop. And that's how we're really going to help the water, is with using those roots to absorb that.
What do the neighbors think?
It's a new thing right now, but they all remember when they used to have alfalfa in their rotation. Back when everybody had cows, they remember how good that corn was following that alfalfa. And that's because we've had roots in the soil for that long, living roots longer into the season. So they remember that, but they just want to find a way to get it done and be cost effective. So they're closely watching, and they like what I'm doing.
For Hartman, it was a race against the clock to seed the cover crop that day before another rainstorm descended upon the lower Minnesota River watershed. For Minnesota, time is limited to get cover crops planted across the landscape in order to significantly reduce the nutrients going into the waters. This is especially true in the lower Minnesota River watershed.